Okay, so you were asked to write a methodology for a lab, and that can seem like a lot, but you have to remember what you were already given. And one of the most important things to look at, especially in this lab that your teacher gave you, was your teacher gave you the title, and that makes everything a lot easier. So your title in this lab is as follows. So distance versus the time for the tumble buggy. Alright, so remember your teacher told you that what you can do is these are always written the same way. So whatever's first is always my dependent variable. And what's written second is my independent variable. So that's a lot that's already done for us. We can already spot two things that he's going to ask us about later on that are going to be able to help us out with this. So the first thing that you're going to have to do for the methodology is, one is asking about materials. So remember your teacher mentioned that we can't do this lab in person. I'm sorry about that. So we're doing it all on our computers. So you're going to want to mention your computer. It'll all be stuff that's mentioned, where you're going to be working at, where it's going to be set up at, all of that. And specifically the setup, though, really should focus more on that, not necessarily where your computer is at in your home, but also just to get this lab done correctly, what you're going to do. So obviously you're going to be able to see, you're going to need to be able to hear to make sure that you're recording all this stuff and getting things done correctly. So on the screen is also worth mentioning, because you're not going to just use any program, you're going to be using a video. And in that video, you had a meter stick down on the ground, and then this little toy car would drive by in the videos. So there's quite a bit of stuff you can talk about, because you have your materials here that you're using, but also describing the program and everything. Now, this is also going to have a little bit of setup as well, because you want to talk about where your video is going to start at what point you're going to really initiate it, this lab, and where it's going to be your starting point for the actual lab. Now, one more thing, you might have a timer out, you might be using your timer on your phone, might be on your computer, but that is also something worth mentioning as well. The second thing that they ask you for in your methodology is your independent variable. And they want you specifically to say, what is the independent variable in this lab? So you really have to name it. Well, that's really convenient that your teacher told you where you can find that. It's the second part of the title of your lab. Now, we can't just stop there. We also have to state what our 5 values were for this lab. Specifically, what are we going to be setting up to measure? Start from the smallest independent variable you can measure for until you eventually get to the largest that you can that be appropriate for this lab. Now, when you're doing that as well, you're going to have to write up more procedural stuff of steps of how you're going to write. Remember, all this is all in full sentence format here. So make sure you write up a procedure on how you're going to get through setting this up and starting your trials. When you get to step 3, That's your dependent variable. Your dependent variable, just like the independent, is very nice because it is already done for us. It's the first part of our title, so you have to mention what that is. And remember, this is to help us run this lab, so again, you are going to have to sit there and really talk about how you're going to get that done to actually get to the point that you can record what you're recording. And you might mention if you need to repeat anything. Now this is meant to be a shorter version. Once you use this to help you start your methodology, it's a good idea to go back to your teacher's notes and really double check it where it gets much more in depth. This is kind of just a simple breakdown of where you can find these materials, independent, dependent, and how they relate to the lab you're doing.